3 people murdered in cold blood.
They wiped out the entire family.
The gruesome crime scene holds vital clues.
We know that at least 2 parties are active in this scene.
Traces of blood and hair point to unlikely suspects.
There had been blood in that shower.
Police must go undercover to discover the shocking truth and catch the killers. This dramatic reconstruction is based on eyewitness accounts, police evidence, and court records.
144th. That's an apartment. It's a house. It's a house. What's the problem there? There's been some kind of break-in. Okay, well, just calm down. What's the problem? My friends, his mom and dad,
The two.
There's blood. They're not breathing. There's blood all over his face. I don't know. We think they're dead.
July 13th, 1994, 2 a.m. The police are called to a residence in Bellevue, near Seattle. Lieutenant Jim Kowalczyk is one of the first on the scene.
The information was very minimal. As we were responding, they said the son came home and found the family was covered in blood. They didn't know if they're alive or dead, or if the suspect was still present. We approached the front door. We had our handguns drawn and a flashlight in our left hand. And just kind of listened for a moment. Could we hear any noise going on? What actually was happening?
In the family room, Kowalczyk and his partner find the first victim.
We saw a small figure, face down with a cloth. I didn't know if it was a scarf or what over her head, and she was down. The cloth area was covered in blood. And obviously she wasn't moving at all.
Upstairs, they make another gruesome discovery.
As we approached the end of the hallway, this turned out to be the master bedroom. First thing I noticed was a bed at the far end of the room, and I noticed some feet on the bed, and they were crossed at their ankles. It was a huge bloody mess.
The wounds to the victim in the bedroom are horrific. There is very little left of his head.
There was a huge blood pattern on the wall directly behind the bed, and it was like a big arc. And the blood spatter, the pattern, the amount of tissue on the wall, on the ceiling, and the damage to the head and facial area looked like that was done with a shotgun. That was a conclusion that I jumped to right away.
As police continue their search, they're shocked to hear the faint signs of life.
I could hear noises come from the bedroom on the left.
Someone has survived in the slaughterhouse.
This victim, a female, was laying face down, and I knew she was breathing. I could tell with that. I didn't want to disturb her. There was a lot of blood in the room. I could see it looked like there'd been a struggle of some sort.
Kowalczyk calls for immediate medical help.
Charlie 2-5. I need a medic ASAP. I got a couple 187s.
I felt that this was a murder-suicide. This guy killed his wife and his daughter. Went in, laid on the bed, crossed his ankles, left his ID out so they would know who he was, and then killed himself. That was my assumption at the time.
Police quickly learn that the young woman isn't the only member of the family to survive. Atif Rafe is able to identify the victims. They are his mother, Sultana, his father, Tariq, and his sister, Basma. Atif was out for the night with his friend, Sebastian Burns. The two had returned to a nightmare and called 911. With two victims dead on the scene and another clinging to life, Bellevue's Violent Crimes Unit gets involved immediately. Robert Thompson is the on-call detective.
It wasn't until I got to the scene that I was told that I would be the lead. And I had just gotten into the unit maybe 2-3 months prior to this, so I had not actually been a lead investigator on a murder case.
Joining Thompson is Detective Jeff Gomes.
We've had, in my experience, one other homicide in the Somerset area, but really that's about it. Really not much crime occurs.
The investigators step into a scene of almost unimaginable violence.
In my experience as an investigator, I've seen many, many deceased and dead people, and I've seen a lot of violence to humans. But walking into Dr. Rafay's room, the impact of what somebody has done to that individual, it still impacts me to this day.
Now that Basma has been taken to the hospital, detectives examine the crime scene more carefully. It quickly becomes clear that in this case, first impressions are misleading. The bedroom offers up some important clues.
The patrol officers that had gone in the house, they believed that it possibly was a murder-suicide. But as you go into the scene and you see there is no firearm, no gun, no shotgun, this is not a suicide, this is a murder, it changes the entire complexion of the investigation. Because now you don't have something that's resolved, you have a suspect out there.
The investigators start to piece the crime together.
In Basma's room, that room had been ransacked, and the sheets were torn off, there were holes in the drywall, there was blood spatter on different locations that indicated that she may have fought her attacker.
Like Basma and Tariq, Sultana appears to have been attacked with a blunt object like a club. The house is filled with unpacked boxes that at first glance suggest a burglary gone horribly wrong. It looks like a VCR is missing, and several boxes have been ransacked. Police can't find the murder weapon, nor are there any obvious signs of the assailant. With their only witness barely clinging to life in a hospital, police hope Atif Rafe and his friend Sebastian Burns can help. The pair had found the bodies. They may have important insights into what happened.
They're witnesses, and they're going to be the key people to help us with this whole situation. They can help us with who might hurt his family, who are the enemies of his family, where did his family come from.
I may have gone up to where...
Both of the boys live in Vancouver. Atif Rafe is 18 years old and a freshman at Cornell University. Sebastian Burns is also 18. The two have been best friends since the 10th grade. Atif tells police that his family had recently moved to Bellevue from Canada. He stayed behind, but had come down for a few days to visit with Sebastian.
Tell me what happened last night.
We spent most of the day with my family. Hey, Mom, we're leaving now. Don't wait up for us.
Don't be late, okay?
We left the house around 8:30. Borrowed my dad's car.
The boys had dinner at a neighborhood restaurant, then went to see a movie.
Let's go, buddy! Lion King!
After that, we drove into Seattle. We ended up grabbing a snack at a cafe called Steve's Broiler. We got home at about 2 a.m., parked the car, went into the house. Then, I guess that's when we saw the body on the floor.
What did you do?
I may have gone up to her. I can't remember. I don't know what I did.
I don't think she was moving. There were boxes and stuff everywhere.
And I saw his blood all over the wall. I was freaking out.
Atif saw his dead father and heard his sister, Basma, struggling for life. It was overwhelming.
And I just couldn't take it, so I ran.
And I picked up the phone, and I called 911. My friends, his mom and dad, we think they're dead.
Atif and Sebastian are asked to surrender their clothing for routine forensic tests. Then they're released and taken to a local motel. Basma may be the only one who can shed light on what happened. But she doesn't live through the day.
Then she passed away about 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was later down the road we found out that she couldn't speak anyway.
Police learned that Basma was severely autistic, making her murder particularly cruel. It's a shocking crime, and the local community reacts in horror.
It was the largest police investigation the Bellevue Police Department had conducted until then. This was a huge event that rocked these residential neighborhoods.
It was a triple murder, no suspects identified, in a prominent community in Bellevue, and it went nationwide.
Police gather information about the Raffets to discover if the family had any obvious enemies. They learn that Tariq Raffet was a structural engineer who was originally from Pakistan. He and his wife Sultana were both practicing Muslims. 21-year-old Basma lived with them, too handicapped to survive on her own. Police hear that the family had moved to Bellevue for Tariq's new job. The house was filled with boxes because they were still unpacking. Police interview many people in the neighborhood, including Mark Seidel.
As a matter of fact, yeah, I did notice something going on last night. I came out of my house.
We had this one neighbor, and he said he heard some noises that night, sometime after 9 o'clock.
Bang, bang, bang.
Like somebody was pounding, like hanging pictures.
Was this the sound of the Raffet family being bludgeoned to death? As news spreads of the murder, tips start to pour into police.
The tips that come in are in the hundreds. They range from anything to, I saw a mean guy on a bus, and they'll even list the bus number. You have to look at them all and determine if those tips develop into leads.
One tip concerns unpopular religious beliefs held by Tariq Rafay.
There was a witness who spoke of a Muslim cleric in Bellevue who was calling for the death of Tariq Rafay. Tariq Rafay was an engineer by trade, but he also was a very devout Muslim. He had written papers about what he believed was inaccurate, true east direction to Mecca, which means that all of the mosques that are currently built aren't actually facing exactly toward Mecca. And this produced a lot of controversy.
To try to prove this idea, police thoroughly examine the crime scene. They hope the killer has left something behind. As police analyze the house, they become convinced this was not a robbery, and the killers weren't burglars caught in the act.
There's just something about that room that didn't sit right, because these boxes had been tipped over, but nothing had been gone through. It almost appeared to be staged. And it's very unusual to murder somebody for a VCR.
As they continue their work, police find no signs of forced entry. The killer apparently came in through an unlocked patio door. Investigators are intrigued by the partial bloody footprints found inside the home.
There were indications of foot contact with the floor and transfer of blood. There was no detail consistent with shoe sole impressions. So it may be barefoot, it may be a person wearing a sock or a slipper with no tread.
There were significant numbers of these bare feet. Clearly, somebody was walking around up there quite a bit.
Police analyze tiny shards of aluminium, which they find embedded in the wall in Basma's room.
And it came back to be an aluminum alloy, which is typical of a metal bat, metal baseball bat. The other feature on the scene that indicated a bat had been used as a weapon was a circular transfer of blood on the carpet in the master bedroom next to the bed that the father was found on. So we have two indications that it's a baseball bat type weapon.
Besides blood spatter on the bedroom walls, investigators also notice blood smears.
There was a swipe mark where some bloody object had moved horizontally across the wall.
A pillow on the floor beside the bed has blood smear on one side and blood spatter on the other. It offers an intriguing clue to investigators.
What it told us is that someone had lifted the pillow off the bed, and when that pillow was moved, someone was still attacking the tree. We don't just have one person. We know that at least two parties are evident or active in this scene. Somebody's lifting a pillow while somebody's attacking.
There's also what could be a spatter void on the wall, an absence of blood where another killer may have stood. A single stray hair is found on the bedsheet next to Tariq's body. It does not appear to match the victim, but only DNA analysis will confirm this. In a basement bathroom, there's a new discovery. Discolored stains inside the shower.
We also sprayed that shower with a chemical that reacts to the presence of blood, and we found that there had been blood in that shower.
This find suggests a murderer even colder than the police had imagined.
The killer not only been in that house, killed 3 people, but he had been comfortable enough to go downstairs and shower.
The shower floor gives up another potential clue.
We found some hairs that were on the basin of the shower, not in the drain, but on the basin floor of the shower. And so we collected those.
In all, 22 hairs are recovered and rushed to the lab for analysis. Perhaps the hairs will support the idea that Tariq made powerful enemies in his religion. Enemies who hired contract killers to wipe out the family. This theory could explain the stray hairs found on the bed and the blood spatter void on the wall. Until the evidence is processed, police have a theory, but no proof.
Autopsy report, guys.
Thompson calls in prosecutor James Conant to help with the investigation.
Usually before you start to get to why a murder is committed, you have to deal with the question of how a murder was committed.
The autopsies confirm the murder weapon is a baseball bat and reveal a savage fury behind the attacks.
The medical examiner testified that Sultana Rafe was struck no fewer than 2 times in the head. Dr. Tariq Rafe was asleep. He was struck no fewer than 15 times with his baseball bat.
There are no signs of struggle on Tariq and Sultana. The defensive wounds on Basma's hands and arms testify to the terror she must have endured.
Basma had to sit and listen to it. Her room was just on the other side of the wall that separated the master bedroom from Basma's room.
Whoever murdered this family was crazy or had a grudge or was enjoying it.
The extreme violence of the attack and the calm nature of the killer's behavior afterwards leads Conant to rule out the theory that this was a professional job.
If it's a contract, you certainly don't muddy the waters by taking a VCR when you leave, and you certainly don't take a shower in the crime scene and leave blood from the crime and whatever evidence you might have left behind. You get in and you get out. The savage beating that an unsuspecting Dr. Tariq Rafe took that night smacks of someone who had a very, very personal vendetta against him.
Who could have hated the family so much and acted so coldly? Investigators want to begin by ruling out their only eyewitnesses.
Typically, you start with the people closest to the family and you just work out. And Rafe was the closest to the family. So if he says he was in one place, we're going to check and make sure he was where he said he was.
Police interview people who may remember the 2 boys from the night of the murders. Staff at the restaurant identify them. And the manager of the theater confirms that they were there too.
We showed him pictures of them. He said, yeah, I remember them because he kept talking to me. And he says, I was trying to do my job, and Sebastian kept talking to him, and he's like, yeah, whatever.
Just following up the lead.
A waitress at Steve's Broiler also remembers them.
Not only did they order $5 worth of food, but they left her like an $8 tip. All these places, these people all remembered them, which is in itself is somewhat unusual.
The boys are almost too well remembered. Police are starting to get suspicious. A forensic examination doesn't turn up anything unusual on the boys' clothes. But Thompson wants a second interview to make sure. This time, it will be more formal.
Chief, if you come with me. We asked to speak to them separately, and we were going to take Atif Rafe first. At that point, Sebastian put his hand on Atif and said no, he wanted to go along as well, which I thought was a bit odd.
Whatever, okay? We've already told you everything.
It's not the only part of Sebastian's behavior that's starting to raise eyebrows.
He was an individual that had just witnessed the devastation to his close friend's family. And everything was a matter of fact. He showed no emotion as to the trauma that was involved in that.
The interview with Atif plants even more doubts in the minds of the police.
What else did you notice?
Well, now that I'm thinking of it, I don't remember seeing my Walkman in my room.
Your what?
You walk into this house, you see your mom, she's murdered. Then you run upstairs and you see your dad, and he's dead. You hear your sister, instead of checking on her, he looks in his own bedroom and goes, hey, my Walkman's missing.
Now I'm very suspicious of him.
If there's anything else you want to say, give me a call.
These two, everything they did was stay away. They wanted to back away from things, and they just acted very strange.
The funeral of the Raffet family takes place 3 days after their murder, but neither Atif nor Sebastian are there.
Burns and Raffet had not gone to the funeral, and so we did a check at the border and found out that they had crossed the border on a Greyhound bus. That really raised some suspicions to us. It was like, why would they not show up for the funeral? Why would they go back to Canada? Their families coming into town. Now we had a dozen more questions for them.
What could the two boys be hiding? Police in Bellevue have no choice but to follow Sebastian Burns and Atif Raffet north, across the border. But they have no authority in Canada. The officers have to rely on the cooperation of the two people who are now their prime suspects.
Detective Bob Thompson and I went to British Columbia, Vancouver.
Okay, this is the place.
To contact Atif Raffet and Sebastian Burns to continue our dialogue as them being victims of this crime.
I don't think so.
He slammed the door on me and basically said that we weren't going to be talking. He was going to get lawyers for both he and Sebastian.
That's a roadblock. They set up a roadblock. To have a feeling or a suspicion that the person that committed these murders is now gone, safe in another country, not touchable, very high frustration.
With their access to the boys blocked, police start digging into their background. Thompson and Gomes interview old high school friends who say that both boys were model students, intelligent and well-liked. Both are from stable, loving families. But not everyone speaks well of them.
Right, so you're describing him as arrogant, odd, and aloof?
We found it in high school. One of the teachers we spoke to, she said that she didn't find that surprising at all that Sebastian Burns would be a suspect in a murder case. Then we also started going through a high school yearbook. That's when we noticed that Sebastian Burns had been in a play called The Rope about two college kids who commit the perfect murder.
That's the one about
That was very intriguing, and we wanted to know more about what The Rope was.
It's suspicious, but certainly not proof of anything. Police continue to push. They discover that the two had big plans, which needed a lot of money.
Sebastian and Atif wanted to make a movie, and they needed several $100,000. They were going to gain about $500,000 from the murder of Atif's family, from the estate, the sale of the home, some life insurance policies, and some things.
The boys certainly aren't making a good impression on people in Vancouver.
Family members had wanted to have a memorial service in Canada. Sebastian and Atif had gone to the memorial service, and then a news person had confronted them and said, why won't you talk to the police? At that time, Atif laughs and giggles, and he runs away, and he jumps into a waiting car. It was very disturbing to watch the son of 3 murder victims just go away giggling like a high school kid.
They're also starting to spend the money that a thief is receiving from the death of his family.
Yo, that's nice.
Police now have a serious motive, but wonder if the two 18-year-olds really could have carried out such a violent, calculated plan.
There's no reason they would strike Mr. Faith 30-plus times.
So far, the forensic evidence doesn't support the theory. No incriminating fingerprints were recovered at the scene, and the bloody footprints are inconclusive. After DNA tests, the hair from Tariq's bed remains unidentified. The blood found in the shower only belongs to the slain family members. Police pin their hopes on the 22 hairs they had found in the shower. Surely the killer left them behind.
The last person to shower was the killer. We know that because the blood of Dr. Rafay is in the shower, and the killer washed himself off in there.
Since the hair is a lighter color, police want to compare their DNA against that of Sebastian Burns. But Vancouver is out of their jurisdiction. They can't compel either suspect to give them a sample. They need help from the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The Canadian cops keep a careful watch on Sebastian and get the sample the Bellevue authorities need.
The RCMP went and got that napkin, and we ended up getting a DNA profile on Sebastian Burns from that napkin, which was kind of a unique way of getting DNA.
The results are good news for the investigators. The DNA on the Kleenex matches the DNA on the hairs from the bathroom. Sebastian Burns was very likely the last person in the shower.
It's not like him standing there with a smoking gun, but to me it's critical that his hairs are there and no one else's hairs are there.
Convinced that the boys are the killers, and believing that they hatched their plans while living in Canada, the RCMP launches its own investigation. Michael Levine, an expert in undercover operations, has studied this case carefully.
The first step of the investigation was surveillance. They planted microphones, one in the car, one in the house.
Is the camera up?
They literally had about 4,000 hours of conversations that they had taped from Sebastian Burns and Latif.
The RCMP discovers that the boys were indeed writing a screenplay. It's about two friends accused of a murder they didn't commit. Surveillance reports show that they stay up until 5 a.m. and sleep until late afternoon. The two boys are intelligent, arrogant, and self-indulgent. They revere criminals, gangsters, and outlaws of all stripes. But there's nothing to tie them to the savage murder of a thief's family.
It reached a point where the bugs got nothing that would help them indict these two. They needed a confession.
It's time for more radical measures. Police launch a sting operation they call Mr. Big.
You believe this? Unbelievable!
What's going on?
I logged my bloody keys inside.
That's your car?
Yeah, actually it is.
A reverse sting operation is where the undercovers pretend to be bad guys for whatever purpose. They already knew that the Rafay and Burns, that they thought the mafia, the Medellin cartel, motorcycle gangs, that was the epitome of life. That was true honor.
Listen, I gotta get somewhere. Any chance of a ride, man? Please.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Beautiful.
Sure, I'm just parked up here.
Posing as a larger-than-life criminal, the undercover officer works his charms on Sebastian.
Hey, beautiful. Help me out.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
The ploy works. Sebastian is impressed by this colorful character, who calls himself Gary. He meets other undercover officers, posing as the con's friends. Before long, Gary hooks up Sebastian with Mr. Big himself.
What's all this I hear about you writing a screenplay? Excuse me? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, this is the guy I told you about. Sebastian? Sebastian?
Oh. Well, let me tell you. This is a killer idea, all right? It's very commercial. Murders, booze...
Sebastian leaves the encounter convinced he's drawn the interest of underworld figures, interested in taking him along for the ride. Police are encouraged.
There's a stick with a carrot on the end of it. That carrot was the movie. Throughout the undercover sting, Mr. Big, the alleged mafioso, was promising them, basically, the subtext of everything was, you prove to me that you're one of my guys, and we're going to invest in your movie.
It's working. Definitely. He's loving every minute of it.
Nice work, boys. Time to start ramping it up. Sign.
Go! 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 Come on, come on, come on! Let's go! Come on!
They understood that these were two super egotistical, arrogant kids, so they played on them.
Once convinced that they've gained Sebastian's respect and trust, the undercover cops seek to draw him in even further.
I want you to do a job for me. Think you're up to it?
To seduce Burns into believing that they were a legitimate, real mafia, they had to quickly include him, let him see mob crimes, take part in mob crimes.
They have Sebastian deliver what they tell him is a stolen car.
Is that all?
The whole time they have Sebastian Burns believing that he's driving a stolen car from Whistler back to Vancouver. In reality, it's a rented car that they rented the afternoon or the morning before. You know, it was almost childish, but appropriately childish, because they accurately, they knew what they had in their hands. They had a narcissist, egotist who they knew he would bite.
For his efforts, Sebastian is paid $200, but the rewards quickly grow larger. Burns becomes completely seduced by the criminal lifestyle and its perks.
Time to step it up. You're doing a great job for us. You ready?
Yeah.
Now you've got him believing that he's, auditioning for the mob, or he's some sort of a mafia intern, and the next is, well, we want to bring you in, and of course the subtext is, we have to trust you.
Undercover officers turn the conversation around to murder.
You said to me, there's this family out there, or there's this guy who screwed us around, and we need you to off him. I would have no dilemma about that.
But there's still no confession about the murders in Bellevue. Police turn the screws even tighter.
So you've been reading the paper lately? Yeah, most of it. What do you think? Nothing new, I guess. What? Nothing new, I guess. Nothing new.
Despite repeated attempts, Sebastian doesn't admit being involved. So Mr. Big gives Sebastian a fake police memo, which suggests that Bellevue detectives have direct forensic evidence that will convict him.
Well, I'll tell you, you're coming to lock your ass. Here's my friend.
The trick succeeds.
We're afraid that you're going to get busted and you're going to flip and tell all you know already. So, you have to tell us now about this murder so we can get rid of the evidence.
Seduced by the undercover police, Sebastian has to make a decision.
Well, I want your help. Now, you need my help. Not you want it, you need it.
Does he trust the undercover officers enough to confess? The trail has led from Washington to Vancouver, and months of hard work finally pay off.
out one fine day and said, hey, let's go with your family and get out of money?
Basically. Essentially, yeah.
How do you do 3 people at once?
Not at once. Just one after the other.
Well, how do you hit someone with a baseball bat and not have any blood on you?
You do it naked. And I took a shower to clean off all the blood and stuff.
It's a chilling, almost matter-of-fact confession from Sebastian. A confession from Atif Rafe soon follows.
How's it feel to kill your parents and one thought and sister?
Pretty rotten, but it's tempered by the fact that I felt that
What?
it was necessary to, I guess, achieve what I wanted.
So once we heard their admissions, their confessions to the undercover operators about why they went down to the house, how they created this alibi, and how they would explain away their presence. But the part that I think is most impressive or depressing, depending on your perspective, is that they had the temerity, the balls, if you will, to actually play it out.
With the confessions on tape, police move in.
Oh, what's going on? What's going on here? Oh, what's going on here? Oh, what's going on here? Whoa, whoa, I want to talk to my lawyer.
But the arrests aren't the end of the story. Police in Bellevue want the boys brought back to the US to face charges. But Canadian authorities don't like to extradite people if they could face the death penalty.
Once they were arrested and in custody in Canada, I was thinking it might take 3-4 years to get them out of Canada. Well, I think it took 6 years to get them out of Canada.
After American authorities agree to take the death penalty off the table, the Canadian Supreme Court orders the suspects sent back to Washington State. On November 23rd, 2003, 9 years after the murders, the trial of Atif Rafe and Sebastian Burns finally begins. The prosecution lays out its case against the boys. The motive is simple: money.
Atif Rafe would inherit the house, 2 different insurance proceeds, savings accounts, and essentially each and every item of personal or real property that they owned, and all assets.
To ensure they had an alibi for the night of the murder, the prosecution contends that the boys made certain they were remembered at each spot they visited. They even went so far as to make a deliberate scene at the movie theater.
They left the movie shortly after it began, got back in the Rafe family car, drove home, parked up above, came back down the hill so that no one would see them pull into the driveway, came back down and went into the house, wiped out the entire family.
The prosecution alleges that Sebastian is the more dominant of the two, took charge of the crime, and killed Sultana first, while Atif watched. Tariq did not even wake up, as he was bludgeoned 20 to 30 times. Basma was the only victim to fight back, but it didn't matter. Once the slaughter was complete, Sebastian took a shower. The state points out that DNA evidence confirms him as the last person in there, along with the blood of his victims. Prosecutors tell the jury that Sebastian and Atif then staged the fake robbery. Then, leaving the house, they disposed of the weapon and went back out to the diner in time to be seen by witnesses. They left a big tip and got their alibi. It was carefully planned and coldly executed.
Okay, let's be honest. Trust is the biggest thing in any business, right? Without any trust, we'll never be able to work together.
The confession so doggedly drawn out by the RCMP is devastating.
Well, basically, his father was nothing, and the sister who basically, yeah, was standing up and walking around or whatever. So,
In the case of a confession, what you've got to show is that there's more evidence than just the confession, because it's already been proven and shown. Experienced criminals lie during these sting operations because they want something from Mr. Big.
The defense argues that Mr. Big's stings are illegal in the United States. Therefore, the tape of their confessions should not be admitted as evidence. But that argument is overruled. And the defense can't convince the jury that anyone else might have committed the crimes.
No jury would ever find them not guilty. We didn't believe that was even remotely possible. The only question was whether or not someone would get lost in the length of the trial and all of the allegations about the Bellevue Police Department being the bad guys and the Canadian undercover guys being the bad guys because they deceived the defendants.
After a 6-month trial, the jury deliberates for just 4 days.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Glenn Sebastian Burns, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree, Atif Ahmed Rafay, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Both of the boys, teenagers at the time of the murders, received 3 consecutive 99-year prison sentences.
It was his hubris, his narcissism, and his arrogance which ultimately led to his downfall. And Sebastian Burns made it clear for the whole world to see that he believed he was smarter than everyone else. And as a result of that, he could figure out how to talk his way out of his responsibility for these murders, as long as the police didn't find out. And of course, the person that he convinced of all that was an undercover police officer.
There isn't a sense of high-fiving people. It was more of a sense of sadness that 2 young lives had to put themselves in that position where they would take out family members, and what a waste that that they had put themselves in a position that they thought they were so much superior to everybody else that they could get away with something